more seconds. Okay, everybody, we are live.
Hey, great. Good morning, everyone. I want to call this special meeting of the Board of Education to order to discuss just the status report of where we are in terms of the school reopening scenarios. This is not meant to be a long meeting. I know in our monthly meeting, we said we would meet every 2 weeks to get an update on public health and how things are going in the schools. So, everyone's, extremely busy with lots of things going on in the district right now. So, we meant this to be a fairly efficient and quick update. So, Bill, do you want to take it over?
Sure. I think what we thought we'd do is I'll do a little bit on what may be obvious to everyone in terms of where we are from the standpoint of COVID-19 spread, its impact, obviously way beyond us, but now right up into Weston and for us in the schools. Then Lisa and her team have been working very actively the last couple of weeks on their plans for November 16th. And we sent to you late yesterday a modification that's coming with a lot of really good thought and listening from listening to her students, staff, and families. So I thought that'd be the second part. And then just open up for questions from the board. I know Dan Doak's got to jump at 9. I'm not sure about the other, you don't, okay. I don't know about the other principals, but beyond that quick opening and then a focus on the high school with Lisa, then just open it up for questions if that makes sense to the board. So overall, in terms of where we are with the COVID-19 spread, there are a whole set of indicators people are watching and looking at. There are a whole set of resources that we tap into. I could repeat all that if you need be, but I think, we triangulate and get even to other geometric figures with many more points than that in any of our decision making. We saw, for example, last week, the leading indicator, but there's no one number, but the leading indicator went last week from 9 up to 16. Everyone's anticipating today it may get north of 25, which puts most of the state into the red, if not orange. It's anticipated next week, every part of the state will be in the red, which is north of 25. That's 25 cases per 100,000. And so it is spreading quite a bit. We are still seeing, though, and this is an addendum 4 revised, which you as a board have. It's posted up on the COVID-19 resource page. After this meeting, we'll post it with this meeting just so it's in multiple places. That revision from the state, addendum 4, was the document the state had issued to guide districts in their decisions as to their we're now calling schooling scenario, whether you would be full in, hybrid, full remote. The shift in there with the revision, one big shift was even if you get up into red, even if you get north of 25 per 100,000, you're not automatically anymore going into remote. You're considering going into remote. The indication or the step they want you to do is look at how you reduce density. How do you reduce density, still keeping as much in-person schooling as going? That translates into, if you're full in, can you stay full in or do you have to go to hybrid? Because that's density right there. That's what they're meaning. Fewer people in given rooms and given spaces, but still trying to keep schools in person. Looking internationally, if several of you have heard me say, and you can all track this better than I can, we know that we've got 3 major nations internationally that have locked down. All of them kept their schools open. What we're hearing from the governor has a major press conference today, that he will now take more of a statewide directive stance on a number of things. He's pulling back the opening status of the state to 2.1. You can go out and look at the definitions on that. What we keep being told, we'll know more today, is that through all this, they want the schools to be as much in person as possible. They want to, as much as we are showing that you're not getting spread in the schools, they want us to be as much in person as possible. How you define in person could be full in, or it could be hybrid, but they want us to hold on to that as much as possible. Looking at all the area districts, I'm going kind of, if you can follow my geographic march here, I'm marching much more closely to Weston in my remarks. As we look at the region, the superintendents, as I've said before, and that's one good path to understanding, we're in constant communication, 5, 6, 8 times a day, a definite, very clear roundtable every Friday as to what we're doing. things I made decisions on yesterday. I'm testing it out with that group fast, getting good feedback. Simply put, that group is also saying, as much as possible, keep the in-person going, but that may mean you shift into hybrid. It also may mean, as what's occurred here now in Weston, where you have to put schools into temporary remote mode, either briefly, which we hope is the WIS situation, while we round out the contact tracing, or the cases in the high school. And I had been advising we might hit that place where we just don't have the staff because of quarantining to run the building in an in-person way, in a safe way. You cannot bring hundreds and hundreds of students and staff into a building unless you have the staff to keep that building safe. And as in any other district around here, it's happened to a bunch of districts, they've had to put buildings into temporary remote because you get a shortage of staff due to quarantining. Because we all know, like it or not, you find out the infection and then you quarantine anyone who might have had potential exposure as a way to limit the spread. Final comment from the regional group, then I'll get into Weston, is it's not scientific, but Friday went around the table. All of us have had lots of quarantine, meaning we've all had at least a positive case or more. All of us have been quarantining. That number's probably up north of 500-600 if you think of all of the 15 Southern Fairfield County districts. As of Friday, none of us could point to documented spread within the schools. None of us could point to documented spread within the schools. That may have shifted a bit over the weekend in some cases I know about, not with us, not with Weston. But do the math. That is showing why we're trying to keep the schools in person. Now let's come into Weston. Our staff, rightly so, is nervous. Our staff is anxious. You're not smart if you're not anxious. I mean, we're in a pandemic and we're watching this thing march on us. It's also something where we're constantly adjusting how we do things. I am 100% confident we have excellent protocols. I'm 100% confident we have a team working very actively and smoothly on that. The 4 assistant principals are now a very trained, well-oiled group, working with Cheryl Zakowski, working with Mark Cooper, working with Laura Marks, working with Joe Maselli. Within minutes of us learning of a case, we're on it, we know about it, then we're determining how to communicate out. Despite that, we're going to have staff who are anxious. We have union leadership that is anxious, particularly for the teachers. Union leadership may feel we don't have good protocols. We don't have good understanding. That is patently false. I'm just being direct with you because it's important that I bring assurances to you that we move very fast in every building, within the building to inform staff, then out to families. We have a several-step communication process that everyone should be very familiar with. So we've been very, very transparent right up to the doorstep and not divulging who the individual is. Even at the student level, we have modified that we will let you know what grade the student is in. We can't do that with staff because, as I've said, if you have 7 or 8 kindergarten, first, second grade teachers, we tell you it's a K teacher or first grade teacher, you can begin to narrow it and we get into violation of privacy laws. So we're working very hard and I think very well. Having said that, not surprised that the union president's raising concerns, Doug Pregman's raising concerns that we don't have protocols, we don't have an understanding. That's just false. And I have to say it to assure people that we are on top of it and working with it. So where we are is staying now as long as we can in that full return K-5. You can talk with Laura when you get to that about how that's working at Hurlbut. At WIS, I think our staff are nervous. There's a more of a density problem there. And I have a logic to my remarks if you're following them. There's a density issue, not all the rooms, but some of the rooms, there's a density issue. And we're gonna have to pay close attention to that because even if the staff's very upset, we wanna keep as much in person as possible. I think the union's gonna increasingly saying, go to full remote, go to full remote, go to full remote. I don't think we need to go there at this point. Hybrid may have to be a step, but we'll think about that and we'll work with you as a board on that. And we'll work with all of those other resources I've said, but we do have a density issue we're gonna have to keep an eye on at WIS. Second grade also may be an issue with density, but we'll keep an eye on that. Middle school staying with hybrid and the approach Dan's gone to, I think it's off to a good start. Dan will speak to that as you need him to. Everything's good there. as good as it can be in a pandemic. We all understand that. As good as it can be in a pandemic. The high school, I think Lisa's adjustments are really important for the board. I would hope to embrace, because there's a real great listening example by that leadership team there. But we're not going to have a density problem there either. So we can be very focused where our density issues are as this pandemic sadly picks up steam again on us. Last thing I'll say on this entire thing, and I'm going to go full circle. Some people, and I was on calls yesterday with the governor, did a statewide call, municipal leaders, superintendents, hundreds of us listening in. Great, very simple call. In March, with these numbers, even far fewer numbers, no pun intended, we marched right out of schools. We marched right out of everything. Everybody went home. Why aren't we going home now? The answer is we're learning. We're learning a lot more as to how to deal with COVID-19. Still tons of questions, but we're learning a lot more as to how to deal with it. And I think this lack of documented spread within the schools is critical. It's critical for us to keep watching. And so if we start to see we're having that spread in the buildings, that's when we may really have to think about a different mode. And that's one reason why 6 o'clock last night, we put WIS into temporary remote, when at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, we didn't think we needed to, because we learned a bit more. We said, let's be cautious. Let's put that building in a temporary remote while we figure it out better. So that's my big health update. Opens up for a lot of questions, no doubt. I think it might be good, Tony, either to jump into this now or let Lisa work with you on the high school piece, then open it up for questions. But you guide me, you see what you, let me know how you want to handle this.
I think why don't we have Lisa go through and then open up for questions?
Okay, thank you. Hopefully, I know you got it late and people's schedules might not have had enough time to review the document, but we have been, I guess I would say, working on this even before we had sent out the email about going to the full day hybrid, because we had kept hearing some concerns. So we thought it was necessary to really come back together and look at the concerns. You know that the students created their own survey, sent their own survey out, and they actually said to a teacher, we have this data, and I think they were afraid to give it to me. What do we do with it? And I just picked up the phone and called the young man that did it and said, Jake, share the data with me. We need to talk about this. And so we got the data. I shared it with Dr. McCurshey, and they expressed very specific concerns about screen time, screen time was just a huge one, because when you look at full day, and if you're on the computer full day at the high school, that's 6.5 hours. Where it differs, though, I think than the middle school, if they were on, is our kids have 3 to 4 hours of homework at night also. And the remarks in the survey were things like, this is absurd. I can't do this for 8 hours. I can't tolerate being online. It just went on and on. So between that, we also had ad mingles with staff. We probably have hosted 3 since the beginning of the year, where staff come and they talk to us over the course of the day and raising questions about certain things. Once the email went out about the full day, quite a few parents contacted expressing concerns also, but primarily we looked at the student response and the staff response. And we analyzed, we tried to go through both the quantitative and qualitative data and see, okay, if we need to reduce the screen time, if we need to, they really want the 6 periods dropped too, because it's a frenetic pace when you have all 8 classes and you have teachers that teach not 1 prep, but they teach, the majority of our teachers teach 3 preps. We have a minority that teaches 2, and another minority that teaches, quite frankly, if you're the Chinese teacher, that's the only act in town. You teach every level of Chinese. So doing that and maintaining and sustaining that kind of pace, it was just getting grueling for everybody involved. So I started playing around with this 2 weeks ago. Julie, Matt, and I kept sitting down and playing around, looking at schedules, flipping it, going back, looking at it. Then we involved the SILs and the SPED team leader in a discussion. And what came through loud and clear was, you can see the points that we need to figure out a way to honor the concerns of both the students and the staff, maintain the instruction for learning, go to something that then can be flipped into a remote schedule, because we can't keep having, can't keep changing. And this is what we came up with, which coincidentally was what we had looked at last spring, and how to make our full remote better. The departments looked at on election day, they looked at the schedule of the full day hybrid, and then underneath it, we had the remote schedule. We didn't give them this schedule and say, hey, we're thinking of moving to this, because we can't do that. We weren't in a place to do that yet. But what was interesting was two of the departments said, they shared their concerns, and then they said, look at this remote schedule. Why couldn't we do this instead? Which was kind of what we were proposing. So I guess I want to emphasize that a great deal of thought went into this. Frankly, waking up, not being able to sleep, constantly thinking about how we can make this better for staff and students in a way that is, is it exactly what the kids would prefer? No, but it increases in-person time. It decreases screen time. It changes the pace of the frenetic pace of the day. It honors the work that they have to do at night. And it addresses both the teacher concern and the CIL concern. I think that it's a pretty solid plan. And I would entertain any questions. Feedback.
Lisa, it's am I on mute? No.
No, we can hear you.
Okay. What you say it increases in-person time? I'm sorry. I how does it do?
Well, it increases in-person time, Tony, for what we have now, because the students were like, why are you changing this? Can't we just continue with what we have now? Right. And we don't believe that that is sustainable given the number of periods over the course of the day, and the frenetic pace that they still have. When you drop two, you have, what I did was I actually took schedules of kids and I plugged them in, because a lot of our kids, they have 5 classes, they have 6 with the labs and everything else. So we took schedules at every grade level and wrote in student schedules and said, okay, how would this affect basically their homework is where it would affect it. Like they would have more time than they do now in school by like about an hour and a half. And that doesn't include a lunch, just a break. But then their homework would be different. So if they had math and, if you had algebra and bio, and then the next day it dropped, that gives them that breathing time where they don't have to make sure that homework is ready for the next day. That's where you get a little bit of the flexibility. I truly believe that at the high school level, we have to find ways to work within the parameters of giving them responsibility, but also flexibility in how they manage their time. And the big thing that the staff really liked was this extended learning hour. And I didn't speak to that. And the way that when students are in the building, and there have to be students that stay through, students that did not do well, that have a D or an F on their report card, it's not a choice. They're going to have to stay through, and to be able to send their counselors to, for example, the library or classroom, whatever, and sit down and meet with them at 1 o'clock and say, okay, this is what you need to do. And really provide that level of intervention, whether it be a SPED case manager or the counseling department, to make sure that these kids don't fall through the cracks. And that's what we are worried about by some of their performance. There are students that we need to have that extended learning time where it can be very directed of what they're doing with it. It's not going to be a free for all. Well, I'll log in or I'll do whatever. It has to be very with the office hours controlled, and specific courses on specific days and times where the teachers and the students can work. Because right now we know every teacher has office hours. We double checked and made sure. The problem is that the kids that need them at certain times can't get them because they're in class. And so to be able to provide that hour where, for example, a Chris Sadler would say, on this particular day for the first 20 minutes, it's going to be the AB Calc, and then it's going to be pre-calc, and then it's going to be open individual appointment time. That will be huge, because the kids say, I need to connect with my teachers, but the times aren't matching up when I can. And so then you have kids emailing them and teachers staying responding throughout the afternoon into the evening and saying, this is untenable. I want to respond. I want to help them, but at what point can I just take a break?
Mhm. Now, and you find that this shift is going to make it easier if we go to full, that shift to full remote, this makes it easier? Yeah.
Well, this is the schedule we wanted for full remote.
Okay.
This is kind of the design that we had looked at. I mean, frankly, we might tweak the time. It's not 7:45, maybe 8 o'clock. But this is what, based on, we started last spring when we were in the full remote about, continuously talking to the SILs. How's it working? Do we need to tweak? And then it probably was in May that we came together and said, okay, let's look at this, because if we have to go through it again, what have we learned and what do we want? How do we want the schedule to look? And it was actually one of the teachers, it was Bill Mader, that said, we need a block in the afternoon. We need the time to be able to connect with kids in some kind of a way. So, sort of coming full circle, we think that this is the schedule to go to in person, because it then can smoothly go to remote, and it will be we think it'll be very effective in the remote setting.
Call from CP.
Thanks, Lisa. Any other questions?
Yeah. Hi, Lisa. This is Melissa. Thanks.
Hi.
Thanks for putting this together. I think it's really, really helpful to see the schedule and all the thoughts and analysis that went into it. Can you just speak a little to the, the curriculum component and how that's impacted? Because I anticipate we'll probably get some questions about, how if the time is being reduced from a traditional full day, then, how are the students that need to take courses like AP courses or courses that, have a building block of knowledge, like a language course or a math course where they need to cover a certain type of content to be prepared for the following year. How would this schedule impact that, or what can we do to kind of help further those goals still?
Sure. Okay, so a couple of things that we learned, what I learned when I was reading through these surveys, the kids were saying things like, I'm not able to focus for 7 hours on a computer. Migraines, screen time, for homework, my slow brain, I'm not going to be able to spend all day like this learning. So the reality is if on the off day, they're in those classes all day, that we are also concerned about their ability to focus. And so one of the things that we have a couple of things. First of all, we have curricular partner time, department time built into the schedule, which means that the APUSH teachers, AP US History, can meet together at the same time. The entire English department is free period one. The math people can meet at the same time to make sure they're with their curricular partner and that we can keep things moving. Clearly, things have to be scaffolded in a different way. Things have to be looked at of what are the most important concepts and content and how to keep it moving. So we have that built in for the teachers to work. The other thing is that at the beginning of the year, especially in foreign language, they did pre-assessments, because, if you didn't understand, like, for example, they didn't get the past subjunctive. That came out very clearly in the pre-assessment in September, that you got to, well, it's hard to get the subjunctive anyway. You got to go back and you got to reteach it. Like, what are the most critical things when you look at language? It's, the verbs, the tenses, and what are we talking about? So that's already been kind of built in with that piece. So we're confident that we will be able to make it work. It's a concern, but at the same time, so many also of the AP courses, when you look at like AP Lang, it's built based on the skills that they can demonstrate. We also went to senior classes, and I said, it was fascinating. I said, okay, what are the very best strategies that work? And the kids said, we love flipped classroom. Sorry, somebody's calling me. We love flipped classroom. We love the fact that, we have a bio teacher that's out. She made every possible video imaginable. So that's a strategy that we talked to the teachers about. They really like flipped classroom and math, because then they say they can go back and rewatch it and get their questions answered. The kids that are on home on the screen time, let's say they miss things, because they said, sometimes we miss things. So we're working on election day with strategies for staff to say, okay, if you don't already have this, you need to assign every blue kid to a gold kid, so that when those kids are online and learning or doing the task that synchronously, they can text them like, I'm not sure about this, or ask this question, or what was like, that kind of communication is helpful. We've talked about strategies where the teachers say, listen, if you're doing a discussion and the kids are online, you have to repeat what kids have said, because there's a sound issue in some of the classrooms if you're moving around the room. The idea of the block in the afternoon is comforting to kids, because then they can, during that time, get an answer if they're not clear on something. So it's kind of like, it seems like, yeah, there would be less time, but there's actually, because of this kind of flexibility and working through the best pedagogy possible, it will be better in the long run for everyone. I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, but
No, that was really
it's
helpful.
a constant concern, and they are constantly working on it, every step of the way. What do we need to do? How we need to do it? All of that stuff. And the teachers also are very, very concerned about, one of the teachers sent out a beautiful thing in the blog the other day. It was actually in the social justice workshop, and he was talking about, we have to be kind to these students. We have to be kind for the students that are struggling, that, have not turned work in. There was examples of some people being like, well, you didn't turn it in, you get a 0. And we immediately address that. You can't do that, not during a pandemic. Stop. Like, we have to be kind. It's about learning. So we think we have a really good pulse on it. And I say to students, staff, to everybody, parents, if you think something's not going well, just let us know, and we'll get on it and have a conversation and figure it out. Because this is it. They only get one time through high school, and we have to get it as right as we possibly can and make it about learning, so they know so they feel successful, and they can, move on and be productive.
One of the, basically, there's a question I have, the current situation at the high school. So while we can actually, have a in-depth discussion and with the risk of identifying people, how is this particular case, we're going to have incidents where we're going to be losing critical staff, right? And we're going to run the risk of shutting down buildings. Even though it doesn't affect students, we just can't run the building without critical staff. How has this informed us as to, if this happens again in another school, how we could potentially make sure that if we can look at the critical functions that need to go on to make sure that we find a way to address those critical functions and keep a school open? Or is that not possible? It's highly situational, but have we thought about other schools? If this happens again, is there any way that we could stay on top of it, mitigate it, move staff around to avoid shutting down another school?
Yeah, let me start on that, Tony. And I have to speak in generalities, but through the generalities, you're going to figure it out. We've done a lot of thinking on this. Again, we have procedures, protocols, and plans. I've been warning that if a certain number of staff went out, we would have to put a building in temporary remote mode. It's happened around us in other districts. What we've planned is, let me talk about other schools. If we had one administrator go out or one support staff at the main office go out, and you still had other administrators in the building, who knew all the safety protocols, knew all the procedures, you could run the building. We can't do that at the high school. Mm-hmm. I can't say anymore. And then if you bring other people into the high school, you're bringing them from their building, and then you're shorting that building, which puts that building at risk. If you put central office people into the building, you then have central office functions that aren't getting done. But very, very importantly, and I'll give you 2 examples. Health and safety is paramount. That is our first obligation. Can we have hundreds of students come into a building, even hybrid? There are 400 students in that building every day, total number of staff, so at least 600 people or so. Can you have 600 people? Can you assure their health and safety in that building? And indeed, that's Doug Pregman's biggest concern. And he's right. Doug is totally correct. The head of the ASME is correct. The head of WA is correct. Unrepresented. Can you assure my health and safety? If we tried to run that building on a substitute crew with people who don't know the systems and the health and safety, and we had a crisis, none of us want to be explaining why we put students in that building.
Mm-hmm.
Now, very directly, COVID-19, we have a really good system working. We learn about it, we isolate it, we deal with it, and we deal with it fast. That's certain trained people who do that. The assistant principals may not feel like they're trained, but they're trained now. They know how to operate and move very fast and help the whole building learn and do what we can. So even in that case, we couldn't do it. But we did look very carefully if at other schools you had one administrator out and still had some mix there, that then with those other administrators remote with someone who knows that building, knows the procedures, knows the protocols in that building, you could run the building. But in this case, all I can say is it's just not possible. This might prompt some more questions. Lisa, you may fill in some, but this obviously had to be a district-wide decision regarding the high school. But and in leadership yesterday, we debriefed, we reviewed, and talked about how we might handle it in other buildings. So again, but if we have, anyway, let me stop. I don't know.
I appreciate the context around that. I feel though 2 weeks is a really long time. And if for these high school students to forego any sort of in-person time with their teacher, and if contact tracing has been done and we've already isolated those individuals and those individuals don't have correct contact with the students, is there any way we can get creative here? We're small enough that at this point, maybe people need to step up and do other things.
No,
I just don't want I guess I feel like during this pandemic, the first route we take is always let's shut down. Let's just stop everything before we exhaust some of those creative juices to say, is there any other alternative that we are here to serve the students, right? That's our first and foremost objective here. To serve these students and to give them that education that they need, is there any other triggers that we can pull creatively so that these kids don't have to be home for 2 weeks straight?
Yeah. No, and Ruby, I just want to assure the board that there were intensive conversations. Your team is committed to kids in buildings. Your team is committed to students in buildings. That's our commitment. And right now we have union leadership telling us we're not safe, we don't know what we're doing, and we're saying that is false, because we are committed to everyone being in the buildings as much as we can safely. So when this situation emerged early yesterday morning, we had an inkling we may be headed there over the weekend. But when we had confirmation yesterday morning, when we had confirmation we had to make this move, we had an all hands on deck conversation of the high school leadership team with me. We then brought Ken into it as to what can we do here? Is there an alternative? But again, health and safety is paramount. So our first desire was not to put the building into temporary remote mode. Our first desire was to be creative, was to say, how could you safely open that building and assure that in any kind of problem that we would be able to handle it well? Because I think as a board, you would not want to be in the position of explaining if there was a health and safety problem in the building and we had insufficient administrative coverage that we couldn't handle it. So we looked at that very, very carefully. We looked at, could we redeploy? And there were still these significant health and safety risks. So that's why, and it's a 14-day quarantine requirement. If we were to bring other administrators, we would be violating the quarantine requirements that are so essential now as the pandemic picks up. I just want to assure the board, we looked at every option. And I just got to say, if your entire administrative team that runs a building is unavailable, including medical backup, I can't really go much further. I really kind of gave you the whole picture.
No,
Opening building up health. And so we looked at everything. I just want to assure the board, and Lisa, you can chime in here. We talked and talked. And now a very important thing is we did find a way to make an exception on the co-curricular and extracurricular. And that's where I did a quick checkout with other supers who've hit this situation of having to go into temporary remote mode. And if you have the COVID-19 driven spread, we wouldn't have provided that flexibility for, and we didn't just say athletics, but we said, let's still let students, because that's numbers that are small, you can manage that, you can control it. So we said, let's let that keep going. And so because that hopefully shows our commitment that if there was any way, health and safety ways to make this work, we would have made it work. And Lisa, do you want to add to this? Because again, it was an intensive conversation, Ken. This is a great discussion for the board to be part of.
I'll just add, well, let me mention a few things about what happened yesterday that I think did work really well and indicate that we do have protocols in that. So, and I want to go back to something Ruby said. It's true. Like, I look at this as our leadership is service leadership. We're here to serve the students. We're here to serve the town. It's all about educating the students and making sure that they are educated and that they have, that they are learning. And so currently classes are going on. We've dropped in on a couple already this early in the morning, answered questions from teachers, things like that. So that's important to know that they are learning. It's not ideal. I wish that they were in the building with the teachers. I really do. But yesterday when we found out first thing, it was pretty early in the morning, Ms. Scavoni and I were in our office, my office, and we found out. So, you immediately get the nursing supervisor. We immediately call the Weston Health District. We were on the phone with Dr. McCursey and called Phil Cross and said, that's it. We have to get everyone out of here now. And within a half an hour, the buses came. Phil Cross came up to the high school, which we really appreciated. He was there to make sure that dismissal went smoothly because there was limited people that could assure that. I think we're fortunate with our age group because the students are very compliant and they're older. And so, you get on and you say, you need to leave, please check your message. Log on in the afternoon. I had a couple of kids personally email me. So do I have classes this afternoon? Yes, you do. Just log on. So that all worked very smoothly. But when you look at when I look at the big things of the management, the operations, the first thing is can they access their education? Yes, good. So they can get their learning. Secondly, the whole management operations, it boils down to things like, does the transportation work? Is everything functioning in the building? Is there someone that if someone falls ill, do we have an isolation room? Do we have a plan of how to make sure that person gets contacted? Now, all those little, the devil is in the details. Do we have the personnel that can execute all that in an efficient way to keep everybody safe? I guess is our most important thing. Like, do we have everything set up so it will go smoothly? And I think that we did, and we were able to do this. It gets complicated in the pandemic situation when people are not feeling well in the building, and then you have to make sure that all of that is taken care of, and that's where it can be a challenge when you're looking at not only that, but then filling out all the necessary forms and everything else, and following through with anyone that perhaps feels well. So that's really, it can be a challenge. I am glad that we were able to keep the co-curriculars going, because if it's an issue of supervision, they should be kept going. The keeping things as normal as possible in that area is important. I was talking to the presidents of the school yesterday, the executive board. And one of them said, I started the day crying. That was because of the political scene. And then I just ended, this was at noon. I ended my day crying that soccer is over, like it's over. And then we get this joyous email. Thank you for letting this continue. It means so much. So I feel like I'm rambling. It's just really hard to find the right balance.
No, I know. And I just, Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I just want to kind of throw out a final challenge is that we're talking, we keep talking about like administrative positions, right? And that we don't have it to maintain this, to maintain the high school. I would just throw out the challenge to you, Lisa, that I don't want the conversation to stop here. If you've got your finger on the pulse, right? You understand what the temperature is with the teachers, with the students, et cetera. If there are some creative ways that we can get the students some in-teacher time, I would just love to hear about it. That's all. Before the 2 weeks, because it's 2 weeks is a long time. And if we've contact traced and we've done that all we can to kind of isolate where it is, how it's spread, whatever, we should not, the students, it shouldn't be at the expense of their in-person education. So that's all I'm saying is I would like the conversations to keep happening to see if we can creatively find a solution before the 14 days is up. But sorry, I just want to go back because for someone who's not very familiar with the middle school and high school schedule, can you just give a very elementary tutorial on what I'm looking at and what we're expecting then? Because I'm assuming once these 14 days are up, we're going to go straight into this schedule. Is that the plan?
Well, you know, yes, that is the plan, if not sooner.
Okay.
And I think what I would say to you is going back to what you're saying about continue the conversation. I know I speak for my colleagues here is that that's how we got to this point with this new schedule. It is our responsibility to continue talking, reflecting, analyzing, figuring things out, because that's how I think, you know, as a school district, we move forward best. And that's been our practice to continually to you know, we're pretty a vocal group, I would say, within our administrative team, and to continue to reflect and share ideas. So I think that that's just part of our practice. But we have a faculty meeting this afternoon, and we wanted to talk to the faculty about this schedule, and also to hear from them, like we always have, to get a sense of where they're at and everything, because and they're a pretty vocal group too. But you know, we'll have to talk to Dr. McCursey and Ken Crow after our faculty meeting to see when is it appropriate to move to this schedule. We're winding down now with our assessments and everything right now. The quarter is ending. So yeah, it might be sooner than November 16th.
Lisa, I have a
Victor?
comment that might help Ruby understand. As I understand the schedule that you're talking about, it really is the traditional high school schedule with the rotating double drop with shortened periods. Is that correct? Is that a good way to look at it? You're moving back to a more normal Weston high school schedule?
Well, yes, not for the freshmen, because then those are the ones that we're going to have to really, really focus on, because they've never done our schedule. But yes, it's that kind of the pace is different. And the big thing is the extended learning hour, which I have to say we're really excited about it. I mean, I've never seen so many people be like, okay, we're going to figure this out and we're going to work on it. So
I'm looking at a Monday through Wednesday schedule here. Is that what I'm looking at on this chart?
No, you're looking at, just a minute, I have to look at it. What you're looking at on the chart is, this is basically it's the same thing with the cohorts, you know, blue gold, like with the rest of the school. So
Okay.
The rest of the district. So we would be on the same color day as Dan Doak. But where it gets complicated, if you don't understand the schedule, is like where you see things like AE, BF, that has to do specifically with labs and PE health and how it wraps around it. So that's why it's written that way. But basically it's blue gold, but the two drop every day. And then if it goes to remote, completely remote, then the colors disappear. But the letters have to stay because of the way that the labs and the PE work, which is probably more than you need to know.
So if I may, Lisa,
Sure.
and just following from Ruby's comment, first of all, I think doing this whole, it seems like you did a really good 360 to get to the solution and really listening to everybody. And I think you explained very well the whys and the results, but, perhaps, my reading comprehension this morning is not to full par, and to those in the audience that aren't familiar to double drops and E's and everything, can you just go through the how of the new plan, like the basic logistics? Is it who's going in on what day? Because I think we're a little bit unclear. I think people listening to this webcast is a little bit unclear as well. So just the basic raw mechanics of and I also noticed a point about students who may wish to stay throughout the day can.
Yes.
Just walk us through.
Sure.
If you will.
Okay, so if you look at the schedule, let's say you're a blue. Okay, let's say you're a blue, for example. Okay, like your son Victor is a blue. So he would, let's say it's Monday, whatever day it is. So let's say it's blue A. So he would come in and he would go to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 at 12:20. Okay, now depending on, and so he would not have his period 1 and 2 class. Perhaps that's, I don't know, Spanish 4 and pre-calc. They would not meet. So he would go to those 6 classes. At 12:20, he would either stay through, get lunch, which he could, eat in a particular location that is designated, and then take advantage of the time from 1:30 to 2:30, or he could leave and then take advantage of the time from 1:30 to 2:30. From 1:30 to 2:30, that time is available both in person and both virtual for the teachers. So let's say, for example, you're one of the students that we are concerned about. So that person, let's say he comes in, he stays till 12:20, he has his lunch, he reports to the library. At 1 o'clock, his counselor or his case manager comes over and goes over how he is going to use his extended learning block. He's going to log on with specific teachers or go, because he's in person, to those teachers' classrooms and access the extended learning, any kind of intervention support. Perhaps maybe a 504 student has extended time and then would have lunch and then do their extended time in the testing room to finish their exam, etc. So then during that time,
So, Lisa,
yeah.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Can you just define extended working time for the people that don't have high school students? I mean, is it optional
sure.
or not optional? It's
So,
really just extra time with your teacher if you need it.
I'm sorry.
Correct?
I'm sorry. Are you talking about the last block, Taffy?
Yeah, I am.
It's,
yeah.
For
Yep.
many students, it's how to be able to connect during a formal time with your teacher if you need it. For other students, and remember 10% of the school is SPED 504, that time would be used in different ways depending on the student's individual needs. It could be if your accommodation is extended time and you need extended time to finish a test, it could be during that time. Again, both virtually or in person, if I'm explaining myself. So then during the day, so then you look at the kids that are home. And this is where the kids say, I don't want to be online for, 7 hours. So basically, yes, they are online from 7:45 to 12:20. And there is the break in between. They have the break where, depending on where they are, they have a wellness break in the middle of that time. However, we have been really working to develop the skills of the teachers to be able to utilize that time and address the at-home cohort, including the VDL cohorts, needs both during the class time and also in the extended learning hour where they can check in if they're not clear about something. And that's where perhaps if you're in one class, you might log into the class, the teacher goes over the agenda, says what they're going to do, and it could be a work period with a flipped lesson. The kids would love to not have anything in the mornings, this current schedule that we have. What we tried to do was mitigate their screen time to be less screen time and be done at 12:20. Then they have the break, and then they can take advantage of the extended learning hour based on what they need. I don't know if I'm being as clear as I need to be, if I'm answering your You're,
So it's still, so it's just to summarize what I think I heard.
sure,
A day, it's still, alternate days of going into the building.
yes,
The ones that are designated to go into the building have a bit of a fuller day schedule with the alternate people having more of the afternoon to catch up. That's
exactly. And then the in-person time is extended from what it is now. Like now everybody leaves 11:15. We want to keep them till 12:20, give them a little break if they want to have a snack with designated areas, and be able to have that in-person time at 12:20. Now, seniors, juniors that drive, they can leave. They can even come back and get that time with the teacher in person if they want. That time right there is really, it provides us with a formal structure to help the students that need more intervention and support, as well as it provides the other students the opportunity to, I know I can connect with my teacher at this time because no teacher is teaching at that time, if that makes sense. So then I don't have to worry about emailing my teacher at 5 o'clock at night and hoping I get an answer, which is part of, it's almost like a frenetic pace that is going on.
Is there any extra bus run, or have we eliminated the extra bus run? Because these kids are taking the 2:30 bus home with the middle schoolers, and if they want to leave earlier, they're relying on their own transportation?
Well, so we looked at that because we were also concerned we're trying to be fiscally responsible. And the original survey that the task force did said that 12% of the families would access the bus in the afternoon. 12%, I think I put the number is 96 students, but if it's only half of the students on that day, now we're down to about 48. There will be some students within that 48 cohort that, and this is what's important, like, it's not, well, my mom says I can come home. No, you didn't do well, or you have these needs. You're going to have to stay. And we're going to make it as pleasant as possible where you can get lunch and all that stuff. So we think that the numbers will be less. Will there be students that don't have a ride that need to stay through? Yes, unless we provide like a north-south bus run. But when we talk to Mr. Cross and the administrative team, again, it's the idea of continually reflecting. Let's say we see that need. Let's say there are 20 kids that can't get home, and how are we going to get them home? I'm confident we can figure that piece out as well. Or if they can't, what do they need in the afternoons until the bus comes? How can we make that work for them?
Okay.
I have a couple logistical questions. Victor's son goes in on Monday and has his blue day. What is he doing on Tuesday? Is he learning new material at home on Tuesday?
Yes, that is the hope, that there's always a component. And we said that to the teachers. What you have to do is you have to look at the learning objective of the day. Then you have to look at, this is the objective. This is the evidence that they achieved the exact objective, and that the tasks in between, like during the lesson, will be or could be slightly different based on if you're at home or in person. But at the end of the day, we keep asking them, how are you going to know that the student can do that? So it's that kind of continual conversation. And I mean, we pretty much get right down into the weeds with them. We practice the lesson, practice that with all the curriculum instructional leaders. We said, all right, let's look at this, take it to the departments, take your objective. How do you break it down? How do you make it work? And continually to do that, because we can't have repeats. It can't be constantly repeating, because it speaks to Melissa's point. We have to move forward. And we also keep having the conversation of, we are not giving busy work. What constitutes busy work? It's not just, we learned that from the spring. The kids are like, stop giving us all this work. What is the most important thing that we can give them that demonstrates that they understand and can meet the objective?
I like what you have here, actually. I think it's, I always call these things a marital compromise. So I'm in favor. My only other question is with regard to this extended learning hour. So on the Monday, Victor's kid can go in at 1:30, but on the Tuesday, Victor's kid can't go in because that's not his day in. Is that right?
Well, quite frankly, we talked about, if let's say there is a kid that that wants to go in, I don't see why the child could not go in because the building is empty. You know what I mean? So if a senior, for example, wants to meet with Randy Green during that time, well, actually, that's a bad example because it could happen anytime when the senior is free. I also think we have to look at some of these things where, especially with the upperclassmen, that we're not going to be a holding tank here for them. Oh, well, I know we had a situation where there was, several people were out and the kids are assigned work and then they have to stay. And yes, technically we have to keep track of them. But at the same time, we have to figure out a way to, if they get all of their work done, how can we be more flexible within certain parameters? I think it's important to look at that.
So, but I guess, so my question is that at the end of the day, anyone can go in, a blue and a gold can go in every single day.
If the student was able to get here, I wouldn't say get out, it's your cohort, mainly because, again, we have to see how it goes, but there will be a limited number left in the building. And so to me, I'm not going to say to a kid, sorry, it's gold day. You can't go in and get extra help from Mr. Joyce in BC Calc. Again, it goes back to what's best for the kid.
Yeah. I understand. I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, sure. No, I understand. It's important because the devil is in the details with this. And we really, like when I say, oh, these kids, they just have to wait for the bus. I have a staff where, like Mrs. Saketa, we have certain kids that stay through now. Mrs. Saketa and Mrs. Bocambuso are relentless in making sure, okay, come on in, have your lunch. Here's your lunch. It's in the refrigerator. What else do you need? Like that's what, to me, Weston is about. Again, it's that whole idea of service leadership. We have to make them feel comfortable. We have great spaces in the high school. Like staying through should not be a punishment.
Can we turn our attention a little bit to the lower schools? And maybe Patty and Laura can just tell us a little bit of how things are going with everyone full in, and also with the VDL students, how things are going.
Hey, Tony, just to group the discussions, I just have one, hopefully a quick answer.
Okay.
Before we go there, on the, I heard all this discussion on extra co-curriculum continuum, and the email went out from Mark Berkowitz on keeping sports going, which I think is great. I really applaud everybody for doing it. So I just wanted to see if there were anything else, the public should know regarding that backdrop. And also I'm particularly selfishly interested about the swimming access, and does that fall within the same parameters as well?
Yeah. Sorry, Victor. No, very good question. And again, I hope that effort shows how deeply committed the team is to in person, and yes, athletics, but we were very careful to say all co-curricular and extracurricular. I mean, Liz Morris was very concerned about the loss of opportunity over the next 14 days for her students, et cetera. And across the region, supers have been talking about this issue, because when a school goes in temporary remote mode for COVID-19 spread issues, the decision in most cases, again, everything's got localized, but at least down here in Southern Fairfield County, we're trying to be consistent, because that's where our families look, right? If I got something in Weston and I'm feeling I'm not getting it, I'm going to look neighborly, right? So most districts down here, other than Danbury, which is sort of north of us, they allowed athletics to continue even when they a while ago went into full remote. Down here, none of the other districts are willing to do that if it's a COVID-19 infection issue that we still are trying to manage, or it's enough spread that any kind of co-curricular, extracurricular could put us at risk. If it's an issue of supervision or lack of staff to be in the building, then you'd say, okay, you're in temporary remote mode, but without still having people come into the building, what can you provide the students? So with that decision rule, we proceeded. Now, I'd already made the decision to proceed, but I still went out and checked it with my 15, 17 colleagues, and they all got back to me and said, hey, Bill, great decision rule. We're going to use it. And we'd actually Friday, Victor, talked about this exact possible scenario. We all see this problem coming at us. So that's that. Swimming, Weston Swimming is an independent club separate from the district. They are right now the only external group being allowed into a Weston facility. I should update you that, and again, Friday, all the supers talked about this. No district in the area is allowing external sports or other groups into their buildings. They're even going to be doubling down on that going forward, just because of the issue of other sports in the buildings. But swimming we've allowed because it's an overused term now, but it's literally a bubble. They go into a part of the middle school. They're in there all alone. They go out all alone, and they are doing a great job of managing health and safety in that bubble. So for Weston swimming, they are fine because it's in the middle school. The tricky issue is if we were district-wide and it was tied to, and it's a gray line, but if it was tied to this issue of COVID-19 spread, we would have to say, while we're in temporary remote, we're going to have to ask you not to be in process or in swimming. However, having said that, I'm setting up a conversation with the head of Weston Swimming, with Joe Maselli, Mark Berkowitz, with Mark Cooper in the loop, just to talk it through ahead of time. Because for our own athletes, it's clear. We make the decision. If you're part of Weston Public School, nobody likes it, but it's a clear decision. You know, that external is different. We're gonna work that through. But right now, sorry for all the words, but I wanted to give the background. Weston Swimming right now at the middle school, in this temporary mode for the high school, they're fine because it doesn't affect the middle school.
So that's great. It's all about communication and give everybody lead time to decisions. So to the extent that offline you could keep me up to date on that, I'd appreciate it. So
yeah, and we'll do that. But I think one thing, I mean, decisions aren't made by each group. Decisions have to be made by a superintendent or the Department of Public Health or Joe Maselli. These are, or depending on what the governor starts to do, he may begin returning to statewide decisions. We'll see. And that's one reason we want to have a Zoom with the head of Weston Swimming, so we're all on the same page as to how these decisions get made, when they get made, who's in the loop. Just and because they're really good at communicating out, so we want to kind of take advantage of that.
Thank you.
Tony, before we move to the lower schools, can I just ask one question about the middle schools? I think it feeds directly into the lower schools conversation. Okay, thanks. Dan, this is for you because I think we've been talking about the density concerns possibly dictating a move to a hybrid model in the lower schools eventually if the numbers continue to rise with the COVID cases. And I think, the younger children will be even more challenged to apply the model that's in existence right now at the middle school. So my question is, how are the middle school teachers managing incorporating the home students and the in-person students while advancing the curriculum 5 days consecutively? Because if that's what's going to ultimately be happening, hopefully not, but if we have to switch to a hybrid model in the lower schools, I think, this is a great opportunity to really understand what challenges the teachers are facing or how it's working. Do you have any?
I have some insight. In fact, I got to be an emergency sub in the building yesterday and was actually doing it myself with one of our 6th grade classes. It is a challenge. This was the biggest challenge that had teachers concerned, and why we need that constant professional development to continue, as Lisa said, to get better at this as we go. They're making it work, but our kids are older. So I'm not sure that necessarily you can apply what we're doing at the middle school at the lower grades. In the classroom I was in yesterday, I had about 11 students in front of me in a social studies class and about 12 students online. And I was able to, explain the assignment. It was also posted in Google Classroom. Students were working independently in both formats. And then I was reviewing with the students some of the terms and asking them to explain some of the terms. And then I did the same with the students who were online. So it is engaging the students, not necessarily from bell to bell for the entire 40-minute class, but there were moments during the class that you check in and with both groups. And I've been seeing that this morning. I was in an 8th grade math class, and the same type of activity was going on where Mr. Reddington was asking students at home to answer some of the questions. At this point, I want one of the students at home to answer. Now it's one of the students in the classroom, and they can hear each other through the microphone on the when a student speaks from home. They were projected and their voice was heard. I think, as Lisa said, when students are talking in the classroom, sometimes the teacher does have to repeat, or the students at home won't hear. I don't know if that's enough of an explanation, but I think we're still getting better at it. And different teachers have found different techniques that are working well for them. But the technology toolkit's key with that document camera, as well as the iPad, in addition to the teacher laptop. I think the biggest struggle, if I had to say there is a struggle right now, many of our teachers and our faculty are still struggling with old laptops, and Dan DeVito and his team have really been working to support as much as possible. But the reality is, sometimes, we've got teachers that aren't able to access as much as they should because their teacher laptop isn't functioning just because of the age of it. I don't know if that helps. I mean, obviously it's not normal education, it's not normal teaching, but I think the teachers are doing a great job and being creative. And I think the students, like I said, have really been doing a great job following the protocols and doing their best to make this as good as it can be, given the circumstances.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Just to keep track of time, we do have a hard stop at 10 today. Laura, Patty?
I can start at Hurlbut and then pass it over to Patty for the intermediate school. So just to start with our early learning center, our preschool has been running all in since the beginning of the year. It's a good example of a model where the small cohorts right from the beginning work to our benefit. Our early learning center has been running very well. Children have been in daily since the beginning of the year, and going very well in the early learning center. We are K2 now in our second week of all in. It's been great having all the students in. They love being in school. At the elementary level, there's just nothing like being in person. It's just the best. Personally, I think at any level, but particularly at the elementary level, having those students in person is very valuable. We are Zooming in our VDL students throughout the day. We are running a full schedule all day, every day. Our teachers are teaching, right up until 3 o'clock when we dismiss. And our VDL students are Zooming in throughout the day. It's a constant balance at any level. And I think particularly at the elementary about screen time. When we talk about it, and the staff has been talking about it a lot, we've been talking to the teachers about it, and of course the families. I think when we talk about screen time, we have to remember that while they may be accessible on the screen, they may not be working on screen. So for our youngest students, it's very tricky to be on and off, have to close out a Zoom, get back on, it's a process. So for the most part, our students stay with their classroom teacher on the Zoom with it open, and after the teacher does the mini lessons, the students are then reading their physical books off screen. They're still accessible to the teacher. So when the teacher says, okay, now I want to work with Patty, I'm going to read with just you or have you in a small group, the students are accessible and they can get pulled into that small group. It is something we talked about and spent some time on at the professional development day on Tuesday. It is an ongoing conversation here about how to manage that. We are very grateful. Our youngest students do need that home support, and our families have been wonderful about supporting at home and making sure they're set up for the day. But for the most part, our students are on and they're learning with their teacher all day long. We have the benefit, our homework policy has always been very developmentally appropriate. So at the end of the school day, our students really have time to do other things. We still encourage the reading in the evenings. We have math games the students can practice, but they are learning all day, full day schedule. So we are very reasonable about the homework. It's more, reading for enjoyment, keeping that as a lifelong habit, and maybe practicing some math skills through math games. through play. With the all-in, we are watching the density question that Bill mentioned in the beginning. In K and 1, because of the class designs and the class sizes, we do have a little more room in those classrooms. Second grade is where it starts to transition a little bit more to what the intermediate school is dealing with high density in the classrooms. There is a high level of stress, I will say, with the teachers and the staff. This has been a big shift to having a full building full of people, and they're working through a pandemic. So, I think we have to acknowledge that and, be aware of it and have that as a constant conversation. We are starting to look at what, in an all remote situation, should that happen, what adjustments we would make to our schedule. So we're working through that right now. I'm also watching carefully. There are a lot of operations that are looking very different right now, given the pandemic. And I'm always looking for ways of lessons learned, things that we might not have done before that, wow, that may be something we want to continue next year as we move out of this pandemic. What have we learned from this, and what practices do we want to hold on to because we found they were good practices? So that's always in the back of my mind, particularly as we move into budget season. Lunch and recess has been going well. Our second graders are eating out of the classroom because of the class sizes. We're using both of our cafeterias and our gym as spaces for them to eat. So unfortunately, we do not have our gym. We've had a very mild fall, beautiful weather for the most part. We are, thinking about and concerned as we moved into the winter months and we are less able to go outdoors. That does pose some challenges. Those mask breaks are important. Those movement breaks are important. Young children, like everybody, I think, need to move, get up and move, stretch, exercise, and the fresh air has really been beneficial to them. It is something that we're thinking through as we move into the colder months when we may not always be able to be outside. And I think those were the main points. I'm going to pass over to Patty and then certainly looking forward to any questions or clarification that I can add to the elementary level.
Hi, good morning. So a lot of what Laura said is what's happening at WIS. We are teaching full time, full in. It is really nice to see all the students again. It's a very full building. Arrival is taking longer. We do not start our day probably until about 8:45 with the amount of cars. We do end our day a little bit earlier because of the dismissal. A lot of cars, but we are making it work and everybody is working hard to make it work and to really embrace all of our students and have them back in school. We are having to do some things differently, and we've been spending a lot of our professional development time to do that. Density is a concern. We are wall to wall with desks and chairs in our room, so kids cannot move around. And where that really a couple of places where it impacts, but one is just the way we teach. We're on a workshop model. So our teachers teach their lesson and then they meet in small groups. We cannot pull kids into small groups. There's just no room to do that. So we spent a lot of time Tuesday, really talking about how we can do that on Zoom. Even in a classroom, we have to do that on Zoom. So we talked about the use of breakout rooms or the use of waiting rooms and how everybody needs to be on earphones, earbuds or earphones, whatever, so that they can be working even in a classroom in a small group, because that's how the teachers really can work individually or with students. So the other area that really worries me with the density is really the mask breaks and the lunch. We have, because we've got a really nice size cafeteria and we have the stage, we are able to accommodate about 80 students in our cafeteria. Which is a lot of students, without masks on, but they're 2 to a table and we have the little dividers. And the kids are really, really good about it. They really are. But then when we're trying to keep to the cohorting so that we have right now, when we go outside for our quasi recess time, we've got one on the track, one on the field, one on the playground, one on the blacktop, and we're, sort of moving between them. When the high school comes back, I'm hoping we can still use the track in the field. If we don't, I don't know how. We'll have to regroup that. So when we've got good weather, we can manage that. When it's not great weather, like we had on Monday, then it becomes more challenging because now our kids are just sitting in the hallway because there's no place else for them to go to take a mask break. They can't be in the classroom. There's too many students to have their masks off. We're working through it. It's a bit of a challenge. And then obviously, you know, the challenge becomes when we have a case like we had yesterday come into the building. And now we're working on, absences. As a result of yesterday, I've now got 7 staff members who will be out on quarantine. So it's challenges that we're rising to the occasion for. We do have, our teachers are really anxious. We had a really productive, I would say, faculty meeting on Tuesday, and people were really able to speak honestly. You know, they are doing their all. They are, you know, working with our students in person. They're working with our VDL students, which our numbers have decreased a little bit. We had over 90 something VDL students at the beginning of the year. We're down to about 69 or 70. But now, you know, obviously we have a whole bunch out on quarantine. We're working full time.
Patty, can
Maybe open up
me
questions.
Yeah, sorry, Patty and Laura, can you just remind me about kind of like the weather conditions, what dictates going outside and what doesn't? Obviously, I understand rain, but is there an actual temperature that then we do not allow the children to go outside?
There's actually a childcare weather chart that we use that calculates wind chill factors.
Right.
So it's about 20 degrees wind chill with the wind chill factored into it. So below 20 degrees Fahrenheit, including the wind chill, typically we stay in. That's always a guideline. You know, it may be technically 21 degrees, including the wind chill, but you know, if I go outside and the winds, you know, we always check it too.
Okay.
The other thing too is we look at the conditions, you know, icy or things like that. But I send an email out constantly reminding parents, make sure you dress your child for the weather, because we try to get outside. I think the fresh air is really good for them, as much as, even if we can just get out even for 10 minutes, I think it's good for them. They need to be bundled up.
Yeah. And this week we had a good example. We had the wind advisory. You know, we watched it all morning long and the wind really was whipping. We ended up staying in. You know, as much as possible, we do want them out, but you know, safety first.
Right.
You know, we're blessed in Weston. We've got beautiful trees and we're surrounded by nature. And it is something we always have to watch when we're sending the children out. So sometimes, even if we can't get out for the formal recess period, teachers are sometimes able then to go out for a mask break or a walk, or, you know, yesterday was gorgeous. The class went out for snack. So we're looking at all possibilities. There will be times in the winter when with the conditions, it's just not safe. So,
okay.
If I may just add something there, I mean, again, great update from Laura and Patty. I mean, the area that people are concerned from external, be they parents or even some staff, is lunch. And I hope, board, you heard that we are totally on that. We're totally ourselves worried. And I think you'd rather have us say we're worried and attentive to it. And we all know we had a WIS, you know, need to quarantine tied to lunchroom. And we are trying to deal with this. Other districts that before us got into full return, lunch remains their biggest challenge. So we're watching it, we're managing it very carefully, closely. And again, I just want everyone on the board and others who later may come to watch this tape or others to know we're 100% aware of that, 100% attentive. And then as we think about density issues and what that means for schooling scenario going forward, that lunch provision really becomes that first place to say that we just may not be able to handle it. I'm sitting here looking at emails. One of ours, because the supers are sharing, Halloween is now showing up. A neighboring district just sent 5 teachers home this morning with symptoms who had all gone to Halloween parties. Another super just wrote to me saying 20 new cases suddenly around us. And I'm trying to clarify whether that's in the district or in the town, all tied to the Halloween lag. So we're actually doing pretty well.
Yeah, and I want to be careful.
And I
I want to be careful of the message. Okay. I don't want a very fear-mongering message out there all the time. I think we're all well aware of what's going on, and I think we are beating it down to be precautious, to be smart, to wear a mask. But I don't want to constantly lead with this fear-mongering. This is what's going on around us, guys. Like we're all gonna be smart, right? We know what's in front of us, and we're gonna be smart. But I don't want to constantly just have this fear-mongering perspective all the time.
Okay, Ruby, I appreciate that. And let me clarify. I get a lot of questions from families. I get today a lot of email from staff, in essence, are saying, are you aware? That's the lead. Are you aware that we're anxious? Are you aware of these things? So I totally agree. And indeed, my view is we need to be just factual, calm, and we're dealing with this. We're working hard, but I want people to know that we are very aware. So I appreciate the coaching. It's not to be fear-mongering. It's rather to say we are aware. But I can assure you the emails and the calls I'm getting are in part from a good number of people, including the staff, is are you really aware of what's happening? Are you aware of what we're going through? So it's not to fear-monger. It's to say awareness leads us to be smart. And I just want to assure people we're really aware and we're working on it to allow us all to be safe. So I appreciate the coaching. But I gotta tell you, within the district now, our staff are very anxious. I think the best thing for us to do as administrators is to acknowledge they're anxious, to acknowledge they're worried, and we're doing everything we can to keep them healthy and safe.
Yeah, I think I think the school district and the administration and the staff is very well aware. I think we have to continue to reinforce to the entire community that it's their responsibility as well to make sure that we stay open. Every indication from the surrounding districts has been that, I mean, I'm sure there's exceptions everywhere, but whenever you look at outbreaks, it's because somewhere, somehow in the community, people are not adhering to health and safety protocols. And I think our ability to stay open is going to be, and I know it's like a broken record, but it's the community's responsibility to make sure as well that they adhere to the health and safety protocols, because that's the way we're going to stay open.
Tony, I want to, sorry, because I know we only have 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
I want to talk about strategy a bit more. Laura and Patty, thank you for just highlighting that you are kind of looking at strategies if we are to go to any other remote learning. I want to focus on the middle school for a second, because we didn't really talk about the middle school today. And we highlighted a lot that the high school, where student feedback was that all day Zooming is just not doable. It's not healthy. But we have not talked about, because the middle school is still in all day Zooming mode. So why is it okay that the high school can reduce their number of hours or minutes on Zoom, but we're not addressing, then why are the middle school students still on for full day Zooming? What's the strategy there?
Thanks, Ruby. That's a really good question. And we've been trying to work on it in individual classes with protocols that were sent out. When I communicated with the families, I let them know that when they are on the off cohort or they are a VDL student Zooming in, they will most likely not be expected to Zoom in for the entire class period every day. There may be times when they do need to be on for a full period, but typically the teacher will do a mini lesson, provide some guided practice, and then tell the students that they can work independently off screen to reduce that amount of screen time. We are working to reduce screen time, even so much so that at lunch and recess, when I have students that are trying to get on their computer, I'm asking them, no, this is a break from the screens. We have mask breaks, we have screen breaks, and lunch is part of that time where we want them not to be on their devices. It's something we are monitoring. I think also it has to do with some of the the middle school schedule itself really doesn't lend itself to the kind of permutations that maybe would work at the high school. And I was trying to explain that the high school schedule with a 6-class double drop rotating schedule, or however they're doing it, is more like their normal schedule where they have 6 classes that would meet on a given day. If we have an 8-period day on an A-B rotation, and for us to try to reduce that or shorten that anymore really makes it a challenge. And it's something that we weren't even able to in the first opening section of the year. Our schedule was very confusing for our students and very challenging because we couldn't even have Power School reflect what we were doing accurately. So it was confusing. It caused a lot of challenges. I think what we're doing with our regular full day schedule, being mindful of the need for reducing screen time, is more helpful for students at our age level.
So it's not as easy for the middle school then to adopt the high school schedule?
No, because we don't have our typical schedule is not a 8-period double drop with only 6 meeting. Lisa was able to do that, and even if she reduces the amount of time per class, she's only reducing it down to 40 minutes, which is what our classes already are. So if we reduced it further, it would just be a very confusing schedule and wouldn't give us the flexibility that we need to pivot from what we are now to a full day hybrid to a full back in. We need to keep the schedule the way it is and try to get around the very serious concern you have about screen time in other ways.
And so is every teacher aware of the it seems kind of subjective in terms of what teacher will kind of, say.
It is somewhat subjective. And it's, it's by needs. And there's certain classes, like, for example, some of our PFAs like band, they're checking in at the very beginning, and then they are, sometimes playing along, sometimes they're playing on their own. PE, we were very upfront with, and we sent that out to parents as well. The PE classes, the students are not expected to log on for the PE class. The teachers are leading workouts, and students just keep a log when on their off days. So it's things like that we've tried to do. Obviously, they don't have lunch is built into our schedule still, the 30-minute lunch and recess. So that's a break also during the day for students.
Okay.
And if they have a quiet study before lunch during ELT, that's another break. So we do have times when people zooming in, whether it's their off cohort or they are VDL, they're not expected to log on. But it is still a concern, and I hear the concern from you, and I hear it from our VDL parents and from our community.
Okay, thank you.
Any other last questions?
Yeah, I just have one more, and it's more of a thought-provoking question. Just as as we're having an increase in the number of kids that are quarantining at any given point, and with all different dates, so you've got these kids coming in and out of VDL learning. Are we considering making any changes to the Zooming policy that we have with respect to kids that are homesick?
Do you mean the turnaround time?
Well, just the fact that if a child is home sick with a non-COVID, or if the parents are just being extra cautious and not wanting to send them in with an illness, that child right now can't Zoom into the class because they may be feeling well enough to, and they may not want to fall behind especially in a high school or middle school class. So I had heard before that the concern was that the teachers needed to be able to manage consistently, who's here and who's not here. But it seems, just based on the dashboard and the number of kids quarantining and with different dates, that seems to be happening already. So if that's the case, why can't we let a sick kid Zoom into a calculus class if they want to?
Yeah, no, we're reviewing that. We had, in coordination between the teachers, pretty much through the union, with the teachers administration, we had set up the 5-day kind of swing to try and manage it, because teachers had said to the union, this isn't, and to administrators separate from the union, it's tough to manage if it's every day a different group in front of us in Zoom via our room. but we've gone back to look at that. And today, it happens to be today, the COVID-19 management team, the assistant principals, and in leadership, we talked about it yesterday. That's the whole leadership team. The setup was today. That team's going to look at shrinking that 5 days down. And if in the task force meeting, even the 2 teacher reps at the table, as you may remember, said, I may be going counter to my union, quote unquote, literally, but I believe that we could make this work at a tighter turnaround. I don't know if we can get to 0 as opposed to a day or 2, because the other thing is people are ill and out and they do makeup work. In a day or 2, at least give a little cushion to at least let that teacher have some advance warning if possible. But we are definitely looking to shrink it, get rid of the 5, shrink it down as close to 0 as we can. But it's a balancing act between being responsive and allowing a teacher to manage that room. And I don't know, principals who are a little closer to this than I am, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah.
And we will have to circle back with Doug Pregman on it once we come up with the new number. But principals, I know we're almost at it. We are past time, but
if I can just add, this helps with the high school change to this schedule, because part of the concern and the issue with the high school, I'm only speaking for the high school, was that we have teachers that did not have VDL students. So they never looked for kids in the morning, and that was part of the problem. But in going to this schedule where the kids have to log on in the morning, log on during that time in the morning, the links are going to be there for anybody to log on. And so, if a blue group is logging on and there's a couple of gold people logging in, then it's easy because the links are there. So at the high school level, this will actually help eliminate that. And we're confident that we can get a much better turnaround time with that.
And that's been true for the middle school. We've always felt like we can adjust much more quickly because of our format right now, where teachers have kids zooming in every day. What we want to avoid, though, I think, is encouraging families just to decide for convenience purposes that they're just going to zoom in. It's not intended for that.
And at the elementary level, given the way we teach, it is, the teachers keep expressing, it is a lot of shifting when a student unexpectedly wants to zoom in. They don't have the materials at home. The lessons are designed in a certain way because of the age of the children. And so I think it's a little more problematic maybe at the early elementary level, and the teachers are concerned about that. And as Dan said, certainly making sure that we keep parameters on it. And we certainly, if we put somebody into quarantine or, they're quarantining for COVID reasons, we bend over backwards for that. I mean, we do everything we can, but it is a scramble for the teachers while they're also, running their classrooms.
And I just want to be clear, there really is a social emotional piece. When kids stay home and it's not really a warranted, it's just a convenience thing. Sometimes we have trouble getting those kids back in school. It's really important that we normalize the routines as much as possible. And that's our concern about not having students or families choose to keep a kid home when there's not a legitimate reason.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
Quite frankly, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Lisa.
It's so important that we have the policy that you can't participate in sports in person or clubs in person if you're not in school. One of our neighboring SWC schools does not have that. And the result is that the senior class, 30% of them don't show up for school, but they all play sports. And that's just not the right message to have. Like Dan said, we want them in person. They need to come in and be in person and be actively engaged.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, I think we'll stop here. This has been a great update, everyone. I think we'll continue. In the middle. We'll have these. I think kind of between monthly board meeting updates. We'll try to keep it short. We'll try not to go past the allotted time. But I think this is really. I think this is important and very. Productive for us as a board and as well as the community to hear how things are going, especially between board meetings, which, in this time, in this environment, a month is probably a little too long. Things change daily now, So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay, great. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.